You talked a moment ago about recruiting, and that has some very different connotations today.
Yes.
Tell us, what did recruiting mean back in the early 70s? What were your activities? Was there money involved? What was going on?
Well, let's say the first of all was basically done by letter. You know, you sent letters out to coaches asking them for recommendations, and then you studied the results in the paper of high school kids, and you sent then specific letters to specific kids, you know, trying to get them to become interested in Millersville. There was no money involved at all. Money didn't come into the picture until we became a Division II school and we could award scholarships.
What year was that?
Well, we became a division in 1980, 81. We went to the university status, or we went to Division II, and then shortly thereafter that we became a university.
So how about coaching staff? What type of support did you have and we'll stay on track and move over to cross country.
In here, well, my very first year, it was all made up of part-time people. Rich Frericks was one of the assistant coaches. Harold Harris out of the counseling center was one of the assistant coaches.
And they were university employees?
They were university employees,
working
right.
part-time there.
I don't remember, because you had so many part-time people, it wasn't until Larry Warshawski came, and Larry became my assistant track coach and assistant cross-country coach. Well, Doc Sasson was my first assistant track coach, or cross-country coach. And that was an interesting story because Doc Sasson came to the university as dean of the School of Math and Science. And he had a cross-country background. And up until that point in time, there was always some kind of strong feelings from the people in the science department to let people participate in athletics. And when Ray Runkle when he came to Ray Runkle and said he'd like to coach cross country, Ray jumped at the chance, because now the dean of the School of Math and Science was involved in coaching cross country. And that I think was a big help. So he was a coach for a couple of years, and then Larry was a coach for a couple of years. And then Jeff Bradley became my coach, and he was just my assistant until I got out of coaching, until I retired.
What about funding? Were your financial needs met by the university? Was money tight?
Okay, it was a different era again. Monies weren't really an issue. We would submit a budget to the athletic director of what we thought our needs were, and you pretty much got what you want. The state would provide the salary money. The state would provide the equipment, such as the hurdles, the pole vault pits, the high jump pits, things like that. They would provide. The rest of the stuff had to come from student allocations. And, we were treated pretty good by the students back in those days. And so we got pretty much what we wanted. I'm not saying we got everything, but we didn't have a real money issue. And it wasn't until later on when as the state started to cut back on their allocations to the colleges, it was a trickle-down thing, because now more of that stuff had to be picked up by the student senate in other areas. So the phys ed schools had an advantage, because the phys ed schools like Westchester, East Stroudsburg, Lock Haven, and Slippery Rock had an advantage, because they could hide a lot of the equipment in their phys ed budget, like the shot puts and discus and javelins and pole vaults, because they submitted a budget, and that came out of state money. Where ours, we had to get that through student government.
Okay. Let's we've gone in depth pretty far on track. Let's talk about cross country as a sport. How far, when you came here, how far were the courses? What was the distance?
Basically the same as when art, but somewhere Most of them were between, say, 4.6 to 5 miles, maybe 5.1 miles, somewhere in there. There wasn't a designated, like a 5,000 meter course or a 10,000 meter course or 8,000 meter courses as they run today. Now, when you got to the championship meet, the NCAA or the NAIE meet, they were 5 miles in those days. And I think the Division I schools ran 6 miles. I think they ran a mile longer than we did.
What about meets? Were they dual meets, home meets? How was it structured?
We ran dual meets. We would run a dual meet sometimes. We'd run 2 meets a week. Most time. We'd run a meet on a Wednesday and then a meet on Saturday. When I came on board, then we started to go to the invitationals, and we had invitationals that we went to just about every weekend. And I was fortunate in a sense in that I had a schedule, and I don't know if you remember, we would start at Lafayette. We'd go to Lafayette and we'd run in a meet there. Even though the first race was run with 7 people, the second race was run, everybody could run. It was run on the same course and basically the same time. So I had the meet set up in such a way that I could, that we ran, every week we ran, even though 3 of those meets at Lafayette, at Lehigh, and when we did go to Penn State, you ran a top 7, but there was always immediately after that a second race where you could run the rest of your group. And so that if somebody from the second group had a faster time than somebody in the original 7, they moved up. So there was always a way that somebody in the second group could move up when we did that. So there was, nobody was ever isolated out. I didn't have to pick a top 7, and that was the top 7 that was going to last for the rest of the year. And then as the meets came down, we would go to, like the second meet we'd go to would be at Lebanon Valley, and that everybody could run. I mean, it wasn't a 7-man race, it was everybody open, and they just scored the top 7 people out. So that everybody got a chance to run every meet until we got to, we went a couple of years to Albany. I knew the coach at Albany, and he begged us to come up there, to come up to their meet, and we went up. They ran 9 people. So we stepped down now after having a whole bunch of meets, we stepped down to 9 people. The next week was a conference meet, and that was 7 people. So everybody pretty much had a chance to make that top 7 by competing, every week. And
Si, you bring up another point. As far as rosters, was everyone able to participate and be on the roster?
Yes.
Did you do cuts or?
No.
Okay.
No. That'd be the toughest job I'd have that Annie had. Because I believe that track and cross country were team sports, and I look at a lot of the guys that had an opportunity to run here that we'd have cut would not have had an opportunity to run.
Tell us about the home cross country course. Obviously, today it's hard for people to envision where that was.
Okay.
Tell us what was it like and where did it go?
Well, it started in the stadium. We would start. We used to start when it was just the dual meet. We'd start right in the middle of this track. Go out the gate, go down, go up James Street, cut around where now the smack is, cut down, get onto Shanks Lane and go down Shanks Lane to about where a little bit on the other side of where the clubhouse is of the golf course. There was a lane that went through a farm field. We ran down the lane to the base of Sinai, which was the big hill. You came up Sinai, and you came down to the road. You went down over the bank, past the maintenance building, down to the creek, along the bottom of the creek, and then, then you come up a hill, and what was that one called?
The Corn Cob was the first
Corn Cob,
and the
right.
second one was Sinai.
Right. We'd come up Corn Cob, go down, come up Sinai, then come down again, and then you would repeat the loop out James Street, Shanks Lane, through the cornfield, and then down over the corn cob, and then come into the stadium, a lap around the track, and finish at the finish line, so at the starting line. Then Al Raymer's coach, Paul Kaiser, who later coached at Shippensburg. Paul Kaiser was part of a section that ran their league meet, and they came to Millersville. And because now we needed a wider starting line, we moved it to the end zone of the football field closest to the Sugar Bowl, and ran across the football field out the gate, and then ran the course. Now, we had to shorten it up for the high school meet, but that's what we did. Yeah. You know, we've always taken pride, and we thought that we ran a fairly good meet, organized well, and so on. And that's why they like to come here, because they had nothing to do. We took care of all of the stuff. You know, we scored it and stuff. And that was back in the old days when you tore off the number or got a popsicle stick, and and then we ripped off numbers and put them on a spindle and things like that.
I remember it was a big deal when we had a meet on homecoming, because we would start in the stadium when the football game was going on.
Yeah, and that, I think a lot of people like that. Not only did the runners like it, because they now got to run, and that time we had fairly good football teams. Instead of, there were 4,000 or 5,000 people there, and very, very rarely do cross-country runners get an opportunity to finish in front of 4,000 or 5,000 people. And the nice thing was, you could go up and back of the stadium, and you could watch, a lot of phases of that course. You could watch them go out, and then you could see them come off of a corn cob, and you see them come up from Mount Sinai, and then come all the way in and finish. So they got to see a lot of it, and so that was a lot of fun. I mean, and that's the way cross country was run, as I remember. When I went to high school, we didn't have a cross country team. There wasn't such things. I mean, we had football, we had basketball, we had baseball, track and field. That was it. Those were the sports that I had the opportunity, to participate in. And it would then later on, is somewhere in the late 50s, is when cross country started on the high school level to the extent that it is today. So
it was a thrill for the teams to run during the homecoming, during football, because it didn't matter if the first man came in or the last man came in. There was just cheering for everyone that entered that stadium. It was quite a thrill.
Yeah. Yep.
So let's move on to some of your memories, and maybe to help you sort it out, track. What were some of the things, the memories that you reflect on that give you good feelings, or best memories in track?
Oh gosh, there are so many of them. Of course, actually in my first year as being the head coach, to win a state championship was quite a thrill. We would have made it actually 3 in a row, 2 for me, if Westchester wouldn't have come back in the conference, because we finished runner-up to them. I don't know that I can pick out anything. I just think of the relationships that I've had with so many of you guys over the years, and people that I see on Facebook and things like that. Those just the fond memories. I try to make it fun. Even though I think I worked too hard, I still tried to make track and field fun, because it was a fun thing for me. I don't know what point I want to jump in, because I do want to tell you something. When I got here with Art, track started March 1st. That's when the track program started. Well, I had visions to go beyond that. So we started a winter program. And we actually practiced for a while, met and practiced in Old Main.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, we practiced in the halls of Old Main before they tore it down.
Oh my gosh.
And then the shot putters would throw over in the old gym in Byerly Hall until we busted the floorboard with the shot put. Even though they were indoor shots, they had to patch the floor because we did. But yeah, that's where we had to practice. I mean, they ran outside, but to gather as a group and do warms up and stretching, we practiced in the halls of Old Main.
Wow.
And then the sprinters eventually practiced in the unfinished section, the basement of Beamster First Stadium.
Yeah, yep.
Wow.
Any other thoughts or memories that things you want to share?
Well, yeah, they were the best years of my life. I think, just to be around people, young people that had a goal in life, were driven to do something, and to be part of that kind of thing. I don't think there was any better part of my life. I tell you, the reason I got out of coaching was I didn't know how to handle the scholarship program. I found it very difficult because we were very successful in cross country without people getting a scholarship. The team that ended up winning the national championship, not one of those people got one single penny to be part of that team. And then scholarship dollars started to come in, and everybody was giving out money. And you'd go recruit a kid. He was a fairly good kid, but he wasn't as good as some of the kids we had. And their hand was out. How much money are we going to get? And it isn't so much the kids as it was the parents. It was a social thing that to say, my son's getting or my daughter's getting X amount of dollars to go to run at some place. And I didn't know how to deal with it. And that's when I had that opportunity then to go into athletic administration. That's why I got out. Fortunately for me, I still also had the intramural program that I dealt with students. I don't know how I would have done had I just been involved in athletic administration, where even though I was involved with students, it wasn't the daily type of thing like it is with coaching, or it was dealing with a staff in the intramural program. I don't know how I would have done. But I did have, fortunately enough, had that opportunity to do that. That's when I then later got into athletic administration.
So you were head track coach from 1970 to 1974.
Right.
5 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Your record was 41-3, which is a winning percentage of 93%. What do you attribute that to?
Well, first of all, Art left me with a good core of people. He had a lot of good people that came to Millersville, that were, as he said, locally. And there wasn't a whole lot of recruiting going on. So, good kids weren't being contacted other than the real top of the line that might be recruited by the Penn States or the Villanovas or those type of programs. If they wanted to come run, to go to college and come run, they could stay right in their backyard because nobody was beating on the doors or, recruiting. After the group that I mentioned of coaches that came in the state system, then, we were all recruiting from all over the place. And so and we were still fortunate enough to have a good core of people and to come to Millersville because it's a good school, it's a beautiful campus, and it's in a good location. I mean, it's, not far from Philly. You have York, Harrisburg, Reading surrounding it, Lancaster. So it was just a good school to go to.
And that would also hold true with cross country. You were head cross country coach from 1969 to 1985.
Yes.
Your record was 126 wins, 16 losses, a winning percentage of over 88%. So would you say the same held true with that?
I think so, yes.
I believe that's one of the most successful winning percentages in Millersville coaching history, by the way. So, is it fair to say that 1981 was the pinnacle year for you as a coach?
It has to be. It has to be to win a national championship. Everything fell together that year. We were on a course for us with hills. It had enough hills on it because we were a successful hill team. You look around Millersville, where in the devil can you run that doesn't have a hill someplace? And so we were very good. I never really, even though in the early part of the seasons we coached technique of downhill running, But it became very evident the year Jeff Bradley was a sophomore. We were at the NAI meet in Salina, Kansas. The last probably 3/4 of the race was a whole series of uphill, downhill. The fellow who was leading the whole race was a New Zealand Olympian out of, I think, New Mexico State or something like that. And then Jeff and the other fellow, the second place finisher, they battled back and forth. And I can tell you that if that course would have finished on the uphill side, Jeff Bradley would have finished second rather than third. Because every time they got to the uphill section, Jeff just blew by this guy. Every time they came to the downhill section, the other guy blew by Jeff. And I attribute it to the fact that we didn't spend enough time in downhill running, because when I analyzed it, everything we did was basically uphill. I mean, I realized that, yeah, when you go downhill, but we weren't doing it in race form. And so then we started to put that into our thing. And you know, as a coach, you have to make changes. In a prelude up to the time we won the national championship. The last 3 years prior to that, the first year in Division II, we didn't make nationals when Greg Kohler got a stress fracture. We held out Donnie Williams because he had some injuries and so on. And we really didn't run a very strong team at the state meet that year. And that's probably our worst finish that we ever had in a state meet. But the meet was on an island in the Mississippi River, flat as a pancake. The biggest hill on it was a drainage ditch that you could jump over. And so we went out there the first year and we got our clocks cleaned because we didn't train for that. That next year, we spent an awful lot of time training on the track because we knew we were good enough to make it to the national meet, and we had to train for that. So you've got, fortunately, if you know where your course is, you can train for it. The course at Lowell was ideal for us.